Well, thanks for joining us on this course. We are thrilled to have you here. This is where your journey to mastering Final Cut Pro starts. Now, before we begin the course, let's quickly have a run through on the content of this course. As previously mentioned, this course is built for you no matter your skill level, whether you have never opened the program before or whether you've used it for years. We will ensure you have a full and complete understanding of it. So if you're relatively new to the program, we suggest you start from the beginning, as this ensures you'll be able to follow along. At the start of each section, we will give a section overview, which describes what we'll be covering in the section. And that said, after watching the section overview, if you're confident that you have a complete understanding of the topics, you can obviously simply skip to the next section. If there are topics that you feel you need help on, you can just move to those specific lessons. We also encourage you to change the video playback speed. If you feel I'm talking too fast or too slow, just change the speed. This is a course that you can take at your own pace, but like with all things, we sometimes take a bit longer than we'd like to complete something. So setting deadlines for yourself helps you ensure you'll finish in no time at all. So without any further delay, now is the moment to begin this course. This is an active course, and we want to ensure you can follow along with us and complete your projects. So in this lesson, we will show you how you can download the media you need for the course. Here there are going to be two options for download. That we have a high resolution raw media or a low resolution compressed media, depending on your computer storage and your internet speed. We also provide the completed Final Cut Pro library for each of the projects. So if you get stuck, you can open these libraries and understand things for yourself. This next part of the video will go over the different ways to download the media. Well, now that we have our media, we can move to the next stage of this course. If you've had any issues downloading, please feel free to contact us and we will help you. Also remember, this is about your learning journey, so capturing your own footage is never a bad idea. All things start here. So if this is indeed your first time using Final Cut Pro, this section is for you. That said, even if you have used it a bit, this section will help you have a more complete understanding. This first section is a short one, and we are going to go over the Final Cut Pro interface and understanding the use of all the different windows, and then we'll be looking at how things are structured in Final Cut Pro by going over libraries, events, and projects. And we'll teach you how you should structure your projects and what the best practices are. Right, but that said, this is the first section, and we are going to gradually start ramping up from here. Hi, welcome to the Final Cut Pro course, and my name is Craig, and together with Josh, we're super excited that you've chosen to join us on this very exciting learning journey to learn Final Cut Pro. In this first lecture, we're going to familiarize you with Final Cut Pro. And this is a good thing to do, especially if this is your first time using the program. Now, as you know, in this course, we're going to be taking you from basically no knowledge of Final Cut Pro all the way to becoming a professional. So let's dive right in. Or in other words, let's open the Final Cut Pro app for the first time. Okay, here we are inside the program. And if this is your first time opening the app, it should look like something that's not too unfamiliar. Now, don't worry about everything that you're seeing around you. We're going to just make you familiar to start with, get you comfortable in the space, and we're going to look at all the details later. So let's just have a little look around. Now, if you've worked with other editing programs in the past, like iMovie, you'll notice that things are somewhat familiar. They're not that different. And let's just have a look at some of the details of what we've got here in our opening Final Cut Pro screen. Look in the middle. Right in the middle, you'll see your preview window. And this is where you'll see all your media. This is when you're editing, your media is housed here. And this is where most of the action is taking place, because this is really where the movie is unfolding. Then to the left of that, you will see two rectangular gray boxes. This is where your libraries, your event projects, and the media that is in these libraries and event projects is going to be found. And this is basically your footage. And if you aren't sure what libraries and events and projects are, we will explain all of that in detail in a future lecture. Then just above this, you'll see a few buttons. Now, these buttons are important, and they're used for importing different types of media, like sound effects or music, and we'll come to that later as well. And finally, the third button is for adding text, and objects, and much more, and you'll soon discover how exciting these can be. Next is a very exciting area. Looking down at the bottom, you will see a large area, and this is what's called your timeline. And this is where your editing happens. This is the place where you need to decide what's going to come first, what's going to come second, what's the timing, etc. Lots of action and work happens here, and you're going to become very familiar with this timeline area. Then, quickly looking at the side, you will see that there are, specifically the last two, there are some special options that you can set, different effects that you can apply to your footage. For example, if you want your movie to look like a 50s TV, you can do that here. And there's lots of really cool effects that we'll have a look at in our later lecture. Then on the very far right, we have transitions. Transitions are what makes it interesting when one video clip is needing to transition into another. And you are essentially your cuts between scenes. You want them to look really smooth or really cool. And that's where your transitions are. And then finally, at the top right, we have what's called the inspector. And the inspector is really that area that allows you to adjust all sorts of different effects for your titles, for whatever it is that you're putting in your timeline. You can see what the settings are, and you can adjust those settings. You'll also notice that the entire space of Final Cut Pro is customizable. So you can actually change what is appearing and what is hidden. So for example, you can hide the timeline or the inspector simply by clicking one of the buttons. Also, you can move your mouse between the areas. You can adjust the size of these different spaces to be larger or smaller depending on your need. And obviously, this will all depend on what you focused on at the moment, be it the timeline, be it transitions, be it the main media space. So that's basically the environment, and encourage you to just play a little bit at the moment. And that's what this course is all about. It is about getting your hands dirty, so to speak, clicking, playing, dragging. You can't break anything at this stage, and we're going to lead you through it. Explore the area just to become familiar. And obviously, as we go through the course, you're going to get more and more comfortable in the environment. So that's a brief look at the lie of the land of Final Cut Pro. I know that you are super eager to get going, but before we get going, we need to talk about libraries. And I'm not talking about the libraries that you store books in, but libraries that store our projects, events, and media. Now, although it may not seem like it, becoming good at organizing your Final Cut Pro workspace can save you lots of pain and headaches in the long run. So it's worth just focusing on this for a moment. So what even is this library? And how can we become super efficient with it? Well, let's imagine for a moment this in terms of an actual library. You remember those old places where we used to go and visit and they had books? But just like a library used to, and I presume still does for those who visit them, contain books that are organized in a specific manner, the same is true about Final Cut Pro's library. Your Final Cut Pro library holds all the data. And just like how libraries have book stands to organize books in their particular categories, so we have the same thing with our Final Cut Pro, where we organize our projects and our media into specific categories. So you may have one or two projects in an event, and then all the media that corresponds to those projects. Or alternatively, you may have no projects in an event. Instead, you have media of a specific type. Like maybe you will choose to store all your music or B-roll media in its own event so you can find it easier. Finally, projects are where the action happens. It's kind of like the book itself. But instead of being the one that you are reading, you're writing the book. And the content of the book is the media. The actual source videos that you use to create your book or Final Cut Pro video in our case. So in essence, you have got an arrangement basically of folders, subfolders, and files. Well, all that said, let's see this in action. So if we move our mouse up to the top where it says File, New, we'll see three different options here: New Project, New Event, and New Library. And as I just mentioned, library is going to be the main area. When you're working on a big job that contains multiple projects, you'll usually start by creating a new library. So for a demonstration, I will create a new untitled library. Now, as you can see here, we have our library, which is represented by the 4 stars, and an event, which is represented as 1 star, as it's part of the library. Finally, if we click on the event and say Create New Project, we can see here we're able to store our project in the event we just made. Here we can also store our media if we import some into our library, which we'll be doing in future lectures. Now, to give you an example of how you can best utilize library, events, and projects, we'll look at a running course which we created not too long ago. To find a library you have already created, you simply go File, Open Library, and either select a recently opened library or choose it from your Finder. Final Cut Pro will store most of your library under the Movies location in your Finder, but if you're working with a big project, we would suggest that you store it in a separate hard drive, because you can very quickly run out of storage on your hard drive when you start to create Final Cut Pro projects. That said, in our case, we have stored the running course on an external hard drive, and we can open it by simply selecting the library and clicking Open. So before we talk about how we structured this library, the first thing to know is this is not the only way a library can be arranged. It will be structured differently depending on your project. We've just given you an idea of how we've done it for this specific project. Now, before we started and edit any footage, especially in the case of a big project such as this, we'll structure our library so we have an idea of what's going on. The better you structure your library, the easier it's going to make your life in the long run. So for this running course, we created, as you can see, that there are multiple events, and they've got names like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, or 2.1, 2.2 to 2.3. And these names correspond with the section and lesson numbers, just as this course has sections and lessons. In the event, we have a single project, which is the lesson, and all the media that associates with that project, such as the main footage, B-roll, external audio, stock footage, etc. This means we don't need to go searching around for these clips, and especially this saves loads of time when it comes to editing. So when we finished filming the course, we added all the media into their corresponding events. And after that, we created the lesson project in the event, and so we now had quick access to all the footage we needed. Well, all that said, I hope this helps give you a grasp of the concept of Final Cut Pro libraries, events, and projects, as well as how to better organize them. Now, it may sound a little bit confusing at the moment, but don't worry, you're going to better understand this as we start to work on this practically. But it's really important that from the outset, you focus on staying organized, because if you do, I'm guaranteed that you're going to be thanking yourself later on when we get into the exciting parts of actually putting together our big Final Cut Pro libraries, projects, and events. During this course, we're going to keep you active. The way we work, and what I found in all of my research, which I'm involved in, is teaching people how to be active learners, because when you're an active learner, the results are hugely more positive. So we want to make sure that you are active in order to be effective. We don't want you just sitting here and watching these lessons, and having a drink and eating a donut. It might be appealing, but that's not how learning happens. Instead, we want you to be doing. So at the end of each section and during the lectures, we're going to have multiple things for you to do. So don't just sit back, get involved, follow along, do the things that we encourage you to do. So that being said, at this stage, what have we covered? Firstly, we've looked at opening Final Cut Pro and just familiarizing yourself with the interface, such as the different areas, like the timeline area, the inspector area, the preview window, the media area, and where you can access different media as well as text. And finally, we looked at where you can look at the effects and transitions. We then looked at how you can even adjust the interface to make it yours. And then lastly, we looked at libraries, events, and projects and how they are structured, as well as how you should utilize them to keep yourself organized, which will save you a lot of time in the long run. So at the moment, there's not a lot for you to do, and we're starting you gently. But even at this point, we'd like you to open up Final Cut Pro and play around, look at the interface, try and get comfortable with the different sections so that you learn to know where to look for different things. And obviously we're going to help you as we go along and point it out. But get comfortable with the environment. Understand how the libraries and the events and the projects fit together. So things are about to get really interesting and really active and loads of fun. And we'll pick that up in our next lesson.